Why, in a world obsessed with facts, proof, and logical explanations, is there still room for mystery? How is it possible that, in the age of science and technology, faith continues to flourish amid doubt and uncertainty? Think about it. In a time when everything seems to require a concrete and immediate answer, how can faith survive? More than that, how can faith be essential? The truth is, we often confuse faith with the need for absolute certainties. We think that believing means having all the answers at our fingertips. But what if faith is exactly the opposite? What if faith is not about having all the answers, but about embracing mystery and uncertainty? G.K. Chesterton, one of the greatest thinkers of the last century, believed that mystery was not an enemy of reason, but its deepest complement. For Chesterton, faith was not irrational, but an invitation to see beyond what physical eyes can perceive. And that's exactly what we want to explore today. Why, in a world so fixated on what is visible and tangible, does the invisible still hold so much power? The mystery of faith challenges us to accept that there are things in life that simply cannot be explained. And that's okay. After all, who hasn't felt that, even without all the answers, it was possible to keep going? Faith reminds us that we don't need to control everything, to understand everything, to find peace and meaning. Perhaps it's precisely in mystery that we find the deepest and truest answers. In this video, we'll dive into this fascinating idea and discover how faith, even without guaranteeing certainties, can be a transformative force in our lives. In today's video, we're going to delve into a profound reflection on something that, at first glance, may seem simple, but when examined more closely, turns out to be one of the most complex and challenging issues of human life. The mystery of faith. We are surrounded by a world that values facts, evidence, and concrete explanations. We live in a time when science, technology, and reason dominate our way of thinking and understanding the world. And this has undoubtedly brought incredible advances and transformations. But amid this constant search for proof and exact answers, the question arises, how can faith still hold such an important place in the lives of so many people? For many, faith may seem irrational, a leap in the dark, a belief without foundation. However, G.K. Chesterton, one of the greatest intellectuals and Christian writers of the 20th century, offers us a completely different perspective. For him, faith is not an abandonment of reason, but a way to embrace what reason alone cannot reach. Chesterton argued that reason is a powerful tool but has its limits, and it is precisely at these limits that the mystery of faith begins to manifest. Have you ever stopped to think about how some of the most important things in our lives cannot be fully explained by logic? Love, for example, is one of these things. Science can explain chemical reactions in the brain, and psychology can help us understand human behaviors. But none of these explanations really capture the depth of what we feel when we love someone. Faith, like love, operates in a sphere that transcends what is tangible and explainable. It touches the heart of a deeper reality, something that goes beyond what we can see, measure, or quantify. In the Bible, we find a passage that perfectly illustrates this idea. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. John 20:29. Here, Jesus is speaking to Thomas, one of his disciples, who would only believe in the resurrection if he could see it with his own eyes. However, Jesus emphasizes that those who believe without needing to see physically are blessed in a special way. This teaches us that faith is not based on concrete proof, but on a spiritual trust that challenges our need to control and understand everything immediately. And that is exactly what we want to reflect on today, the mystery of faith. How can faith exist in a world so oriented by reason? How can we trust in something we cannot see or touch? And more importantly, why should we? The answer, as we will see, lies in the power of mystery. Chesterton invites us to consider that mystery is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be embraced and celebrated. The mystery of faith reminds us that we do not need to have all the answers to continue on the journey. Instead, faith gives us the strength to move forward, even when the path ahead is not completely clear. Faith, in its essence, is an act of trust. It is believing that even without all the answers, there is something greater guiding our lives. It is believing that even in uncertainties, there is a purpose and meaning that transcend our immediate understanding. And this leads us to an important reflection. In our incessant quest for answers, are we losing sight of something essential? By trying to control and understand everything, are we forgetting the value of simply trusting and allowing mystery to guide us? Chesterton offers a rich vision of this. He argues that life would be unbearably tedious if everything were explainable and predictable. Mystery, according to him, is what gives life its flavor. Think about it. Why do we enjoy reading a good book or watching an intriguing movie so much? It's because we don't know what will happen. It's because there is suspense. There is mystery. If we already knew all the details of the story, we would lose interest quickly. Life, in the same way, needs mystery to be lived fully. And it is at this point that faith becomes so powerful. It teaches us that mystery is not a sign of weakness or ignorance, but an essential part of the human condition. Faith invites us to accept that there are things we will never fully understand, and that's okay. Science, for example, can help us understand how the universe works, but it cannot tell us why the universe exists in the first place. Faith, on the other hand, gives us an answer, not a scientific or rational answer, but a spiritual and deep answer that touches the heart of existence. Faith also teaches us to trust in something greater than ourselves. It reminds us that even when things seem uncertain or confusing, there is a higher power in control. This trust can bring immense peace, especially in times of crisis. When we face difficulties, faith gives us the courage to move forward, even without knowing exactly how things will turn out. It is a trust that transcends reason and connects us to something greater, something we often cannot fully comprehend. And this is precisely what makes the mystery of faith so fascinating. It is not necessary to have all the answers to live a life of faith. On the contrary, it is the acceptance of mystery that allows us to experience the depth and beauty of faith. Chesterton used to say that the modern man is willing to believe in anything, as long as it is not something he can fully understand. This reveals a deep truth about the human condition. We want to believe, but we are afraid of the unknown. Yet it is in the unknown that faith finds its greatest expression. In a world that values explanation and certainty so much, faith invites us to embrace mystery. It reminds us that we do not need to understand everything to trust that there is a greater purpose. Faith offers us a new perspective on life, a perspective that is not limited to proof and evidence, but opens us up to the mystery of the universe and our place in it. Thus, the mystery of faith is, in fact, an invitation. An invitation to live with humility, recognizing that we do not have all the answers, but trusting that there is something greater at work. An invitation to accept that mystery is not an obstacle, but an opportunity for spiritual growth. And finally, an invitation to let go of control and embrace trust, knowing that even without seeing or understanding, we can continue walking in faith. This journey is challenging, no doubt, but as we will see throughout this video, it is precisely this journey that gives us the deepest answers. Not because all questions will be answered, but because in the process of living by faith, we discover that some questions are more important than the answers. As Chesterton brilliantly observed, the world is not lacking in wonders, but in a sense of wonder. And it is faith with all its mystery that restores this sense of wonder to us, allowing us to live with a heart open to the unknown and a soul connected to the divine. Now that we've started reflecting on the mystery of faith and its relation to the modern world, let's delve a little deeper into this idea, guided by the wisdom of G.K. Chesterton and the timeless truths of Scripture. Chesterton, in his work Orthodoxy, offers a fascinating approach to how faith not only challenges but also enriches our understanding of reality. He did not see faith as a mere abandonment of reason, but as something that transcends it, inviting us to view the world with a perspective that goes beyond the visible and the explainable. One of the most striking passages from Orthodoxy deals exactly with this relationship between faith and reason. Reason is always a light in a small cave. It only reveals the walls. But faith is a flame in a cathedral, and it illuminates everything but leaves something in the dark. In this passage, Chesterton invites us to reflect on the fact that reason, as useful as it is, has its limits. It illuminates only part of reality, while faith allows us to see further, enabling us to glimpse something greater. though not entirely clear. This does not mean that reason is useless, but that it alone is not enough to encompass all the complexity and depth of life. There is an inherent mystery in the universe and human existence that reason cannot fully unveil, and this is precisely where faith comes in. The Bible reflects this same idea when it reminds us in Proverbs 3 verse 5, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." This passage teaches us that while reason has its place, it should not be our sole source of trust. Instead, we are called to trust in something greater, in God, who sees beyond what our eyes can see and our minds can understand. Faith leads us to trust, even when our reason leaves us in doubt. Chesterton also addresses this issue by discussing the paradox of faith. In many of his writings, he uses the image of a closed circle versus a cross. The circle for him represents purely rational thinking, closed, limited, with no room for expansion. The cross, with its arms reaching out in multiple directions, symbolizes faith, which opens up a path to infinity. He writes, "The circle is perfect and infinite in its nature, but it is small with no room for expansion. The cross, on the other hand, has a shape that opens up to what is beyond itself." This concept is fundamental to understanding the mystery of faith. Reason can give us answers within a closed system, but faith invites us to open that system, to look beyond what we know. It is in this beyond that we find mystery. Faith reminds us that life is more than what we can measure, calculate, or predict. And in this sense, it is not in conflict with reason. On the contrary, it expands our horizons, allowing us to contemplate the deeper questions of existence. If we look at the Gospel of John, we see another example of how faith operates beyond what we can see. In chapter 20, after Jesus' resurrection, Thomas declares that he will only believe if he sees the marks of the nails in Jesus' hands. Jesus, appearing to him, says, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." John 20:29. This moment is a clear invitation to all of us. Faith does not require seeing to believe, but rather trusting in something greater, even when we do not have concrete proof. Chesterton argues that mystery is not something to be feared or ignored, but celebrated. He uses the metaphor of adventure to describe the life of faith. For him, faith is a journey, an adventure filled with surprises and mysteries, where not everything needs to be explained immediately. This is perfectly in line with what we find in the Bible. In Hebrews 11 verse 1 we read, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Faith is a confidence that transcends immediate proof and evidence. One of the most fascinating points Chesterton brings up in his writings is that far from limiting our view of the world, faith makes us more open to the mystery and wonders that surround us. In his work, The Everlasting Man, he writes, "The world is not a place of explanations, but of wonders. Mystery is its engine. Losing the ability to wonder is losing the ability to live." And this leads us to reflect, are we losing our ability to wonder at the mystery of life? In a world that relentlessly seeks rational and scientific explanations for everything, faith invites us to take a different stance, not to abandon reason, but to embrace humility before what we cannot fully comprehend. The Bible reinforces this idea in Isaiah 55:8-9, where God says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." The mystery of faith reminds us that there is a divine wisdom that surpasses our understanding. We are not called to understand everything, but to trust in the one who knows and sees everything. Chesterton also warns us against the danger of trying to box in God within the limits of our reason. He said that often, modern man has a mind so open that his intelligence falls out. In other words, by trying to fit the mystery of faith within the limitations of human logic, we lose the greatness and beauty of what it really means to believe. Faith, for him, is the recognition that there are things greater than ourselves, and that our finite minds cannot and should not grasp everything. And it is at this point that the cross of Christ becomes the greatest mystery of all. The cross, which seemingly symbolizes defeat and death, is in fact the greatest triumph in history. Jesus willingly gave himself to death to bring life. This defies human reason. How can something so tragic be so glorious? But as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1:18, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." This is the paradox of faith. What seems like foolishness to the world is in fact the wisdom and power of God. If you're enjoying this reflection, keep watching to discover how this mystery of faith can transform the way we live and face daily challenges. We will reach a point that may completely change your perspective on what it means to believe. Returning to the point that faith leads us to a spiritual adventure, Chesterton challenges us to see life as more than just problems to be solved. Instead, he suggests that life is a mystery to be lived with joy and trust. In The Man Who Was Thursday, Chesterton uses the suspense and mystery of an engaging plot to illustrate how what often seems incomprehensible and frightening, in the end reveals itself to be part of a greater plan, full of meaning and purpose. This same idea appears in the Bible, in Romans 8:28. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Even when we don't understand what is happening, faith gives us the assurance that there is a divine plan at work, and that in the end, everything will have meaning. Chesterton invites us to embrace the paradox, the tension between the known and the unknown, between reason and mystery. He believed that living without mystery would be living without adventure, without enchantment. And this brings us back to the idea that the mystery of faith does not limit us, but frees us. It invites us to trust in God, not despite our doubts, but precisely through them. Faith allows us to walk without seeing the entire path ahead, knowing that in the end, we will reach our destination. In his work Heretics, Chesterton criticizes excessive skepticism, saying that the skeptic is always so worried about not being deceived that he ends up missing the truth. For him, faith requires a kind of courage, the courage to believe in what cannot be proven, the courage to trust the mystery. And this is something the modern world often forgets. In our quest for security and control, we avoid mystery, but Chesterton reminds us that it is precisely in this mystery that we find true freedom. To conclude this part of the development, we can say that the mystery of faith, as presented by Chesterton and the Bible, is not something to be avoided or feared. On the contrary, it is something to be embraced and celebrated. Faith is not the absence of questions, but the trust that, even without all the answers, we are in the hands of a God who loves us and has a purpose for our lives. We arrive at the central point of this reflection. The true power of the mystery of faith is not in obtaining definitive answers, but in the freedom it offers us to trust in something greater. Chesterton believed that mystery was not an obstacle to reason, but a way to transcend it. And that is the great paradox of faith. It does not offer us all the answers, but instead, it gives us the courage to continue, even without fully understanding the way ahead. Think of the cross, which for many seems like a symbol of defeat, but for those who have faith, is the greatest symbol of redemption and victory. How is it possible that something so terrible, a brutal death, can become the greatest demonstration of love and sacrifice humanity has ever known? The mystery of faith is exactly that. Believing that what seems like madness, in Paul's words, is actually the wisdom of God. 1 Corinthians 1:18. Faith allows us to see beyond appearances, to trust beyond evidence, and to love beyond limits. At the climax of this journey, we are confronted with the greatest truth about faith. It does not need proof, because the greatest proof has already been given, the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. This is the essence of Christianity, the greatest mystery of all, and also the greatest source of hope. Chesterton understood this when he said that the cross may make us tremble, but it also lifts us up. The mystery of faith, embodied in the cross, is what gives us the strength to face any adversity, for we know that, amid chaos and confusion, there is a greater truth, a reality that transcends our human limitations. Now, stop and reflect. What does this mean for you? What can the mystery of faith do in your daily life? How can it transform your way of seeing the world and your personal struggles? When we embrace the mystery of faith, we are no longer slaves to doubt or fear. On the contrary, we are freed to live with confidence and hope, knowing that even though we cannot see the whole path, We are being guided by the one who already knows the final destination. If you've stayed with us this far, know that the mystery of faith is not something distant, but a key that can transform how you live with your own uncertainties. Stay until the end to discover how to apply this trust in your practical life. Chesterton reminds us that living without faith is living without adventure, without the enchantment that mystery provides. If we try to understand everything, to control everything, we end up losing the beauty of the unexpected, the inexplicable, the wonderful. Faith invites us to let go of that control, to trust that there is a greater purpose in all things, even those we cannot fully understand. This is the transformative power of faith. It gives us not only the strength to face the unknown, but also the peace to live with the unknown. In a world that values control and certainty so much, faith offers us something much more valuable, the freedom to trust in mystery, to walk toward the unknown with the certainty that, in the end, we will find what we have always been seeking. Thus, the climax of this reflection brings us to an important conclusion. The mystery of faith is not a barrier, but a bridge that takes us beyond ourselves, beyond the limitations of reason, to the heart of the divine, where we find answers that cannot be explained with words, but can be lived with the heart. Now that we've journeyed through the mystery of faith, we arrive at the conclusion that faith is not a simple escape from the unknown or an attempt to avoid difficult questions. On the contrary, faith is a conscious choice to trust in what we cannot see, to believe that there is something beyond what reason can offer us. As we have seen with Chesterton, mystery should not be something feared but embraced. And when we do, we discover that the mystery of faith reveals a deeper dimension of life, a dimension that reason alone cannot reach. Throughout this video, we've explored the idea that faith does not eliminate doubts, but gives us the strength to live with them. The Bible teaches us that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hebrews 11 verse 1. And this certainty does not come from external evidence or concrete proof, but from an inner trust, from a surrender to mystery. As Chesterton pointed out, living without faith is like walking in circles, trapped in a cycle of unanswered questions. But faith, on the other hand, allows us to walk in a straight line, toward a greater purpose, even when the path is not yet completely clear. The great lesson we can take from this is that mystery is not the absence of answers, but a source of spiritual depth and richness. Faith, by inviting us to live with this mystery, is not asking us to abandon reason but to go beyond it. As we have seen, both in Chesterton's work and in the biblical texts, faith opens doors to a broader understanding of life, an understanding that involves the heart, the soul, and trust in something greater than ourselves. And what does this mean for you? What can this reflection on the mystery of faith change in your life? Perhaps you are facing doubts, uncertainties, or situations where the answers do not seem clear. Perhaps you are trying to control every detail, seeking a logical explanation for everything that happens. But faith invites us to let go of that control, to trust that there is a greater plan at work, even when we cannot see it. When we accept mystery, we free ourselves from the pressure to understand everything and begin to live with more lightness, with more hope, and above all, with more peace. The journey of faith is above all a journey of trust. Trust that, even in the midst of uncertainties and the unknown, there is a hand guiding us. G.K. Chesterton reminded us that this trust in mystery is what makes life an adventure filled with beauty, surprises, and moments when we realize that, despite not seeing everything, we are being led in the right direction. Therefore, as we conclude this reflection, the message I want to leave is clear. The mystery of faith is not something that limits us, but something that frees us. It frees us from the need for immediate answers, from the anguish of trying to control the uncontrollable, and offers us the opportunity to live more fully. Faith allows us to walk with the confidence that, even in the darkness, there is a light ahead of us, guiding our steps. May you, from today on, embrace this mystery in your own life and discover the freedom, peace, and depth it brings. After all, as Chesterton reminded us, faith gives us eyes to see the invisible and courage to face the impossible. And by living with that faith, you can experience a life much richer in meaning and purpose.